Alright guys, today we're going to be doing a talk on this book called Getting There. It was released this year, that's right, this year, and you won't believe the amount of famous, successful people of all backgrounds, from composers to billionaires, that this woman, Gillian Segal, was able to get on this book. So basically, there's an incredible amount of interviews from all these different types of people. Let me just read off a few of these. CBS President and CEO, big wave surfer, Nobel Peace Prize recipient, Diary of a Wimpy Kid author, Care USA President and CEO, Warren Buffett, investor and billionaire, Michael Bloomberg, investor, billionaire, Sarah Blakely, female, Spanx, investor, owner, billionaire, Anderson Cooper, a millionaire many times over, John Paul DeJorio, billionaire and CEO and co-founder of Petroleum Spirits and John Paul Mitchell Systems. I can go on and on. And man, do I have a lot to say about this book. I think reading this book is very, very useful for a lot of reasons. I've actually gotten a lot of information from a lot of these people from other books or other information online. And the common theme I want to stress in this video is the fact that so many people I have talked to, just your average Joe, they assume that this person got to where he is off of connections, luck, status, prestige, being born into a rich family, or whatever else. And I see it all across the board. You know, I've been talking to people of all ethnicities, and like it or not, the conversation will lead to one of these successful people, and that's what they assume. And a lot of these figures in this book, they illustrate how their life story was one of where they had to work their own way to the top, and they had to persevere through a lot of rejection, a lot of poor, horrible times, and a lot of struggles. And I just want to briefly go over a few of these people. I guess the biggest one I want to start with is Anderson Cooper. He is in this book, and right now he's a millionaire many times over. He is a reporter, and he likes to travel to different places. He's very well known, and he goes to very tumultuous places with a lot of turmoil politically, or warfare, and then he covers those places, and he does a lot of things on CNN. Again, I'm not really big on this, so I don't know the specifics of what he does. However, he's a great example of someone who you would think he had an easy life, and he had all these connections and so forth. And I'm not gonna lie, the reason a lot of people say things and make these assumptions is because there's always a grain of truth to it, because there's probably someone who lucked out and took these advantages or had these advantages and didn't have to do much work. But I really do think that this book illustrates very well as through my own experience and my own gathering of knowledge through all these different sources, that in this world and this day and age, if you really want to be someone, oftentimes you have to bust your own butt and work for it. And of course, there are people occasionally, which I think is a very small minority, who luck out and make it big off of luck. But nowadays, you have to bust your own butt and do a lot of your own things. So I'm getting off track. Anderson Cooper, here's what I want to say about him. Anderson Cooper, he graduated from Yale University. He had all these prestigious things behind him, wealthy family, obviously had connections, and he could not get an entry-level job doing what he wanted to do in television. He couldn't get an entry-level television job, and so he had to make his own way. So what he did was he lived on the savings that he had himself, and went out on his own without a job, and just went to places that he wanted to go to, and then he filmed those places and cover those stories and then try to sell them to this little hodgepodge, tiny, small television station that he used to work for. And eventually, because he was selling them for so cheap and putting in so much work, they finally decided, okay, we'll buy these off of you. And that really got the ball rolling. It was a very slow journey, and it really just illustrates very well where he came from. And there's this great book by Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife, and she also does a bunch of interviews as well. And that's where I learned my story, this story about Anderson Cooper. Gillian Segal, she actually also profiles that exact same story in this book, and it's a very interesting story, and it just shows how this man went out on his own to do what he wanted to do, and then tried to create value from that and make a living off of that, which he slowly started doing. And despite his connections and his prestige and his fancy degree, it couldn't get him where he wanted to go. In addition to that, he also remarked how even if he had gotten that entry-level job, the way the hierarchy and structure of these television networks worked, he would probably not have even advanced far, even busting his butt 10 years into that company. Anyhow, let's move on to another very interesting person profiled in this book. His name is Hans Zimmer. This man is a beast composer. He is probably one of the best film musical composers of this generation so far. He has done scores for The Dark Knight. He has done scores for Inception. He is a very, very good composer, and you know, this is also very interesting because I conversed with a person who brought this man up because he said that this is what he really wanted to do one day. And I told him, well, it's a lot of work. It may not be what you think. It's not that easy. And why aren't you working on it on your free time? And long story short, I see this problem in a lot of people, even myself. The truth is that the journey to these destinations oftentimes require a lot of work, a lot of passion and love and dedication towards your task. And it seemed like a classic case of this man saying how, Hans Zimmer lucked out and just assuming a lot of things about him and using these almost a bit as crutches to not, as reasons for why he wasn't progressing towards that path right now. And even though he says that's the exact job I would want one day, I asked him about, well, are you working to progress yourself? Are you working to try and do this? Are you spending your free time to learn more about composing? And are you composing mini scores for mini short films? Are you doing any of that to get better at this and start developing yourself? And he said he dabbles in that, but like most people, they end up spending a lot of time doing other things in their free time, video games and so forth. So it is quite interesting. And here's what Hans Zimmer's journey was in a nutshell, summarized in this book. It's again, these chapters are quite short, about 4 or 5 pages, and it's a quick summarization of their life and then on the core pieces of advice they want to give to someone who wants to succeed. And with Hans Zimmer, his basic story was that he failed in school. He got the worst grades possible, and it was horrendous because he grew up in Germany, and the whole premise or assumption in terms of the culture in Germany is that if you don't get good grades, you don't follow the rules, you will amount to nothing. And his mother was horrendously just torn apart. His father had already died, and he was told by many people that he would amount to nothing. Eventually, he started getting into music, and even then he was thrown out of his music class and things weren't going well. Eventually, he started getting into music on his own, and he got his own job and started his own uh, business with music. And he started making money with music, and it was not a lot of money. And one of his core tenets, which I find very fascinating, is how he chose to pursue this for non materialistic reasons. He remarks on how he didn't do this for money, he didn't do it for any of the materialistic reasons that a lot of people did it for, but he just loved what he did. And for many, many, many years, he was a poor musical artist. And he hung around a lot of other poor musical artists, and he made his way, made his living, and at least survived by doing small compositions and being an artist and performing at local bars or local coffee shops. Over time, eventually, he developed his craft, and over many years, small things added up, and small achievements. One score for one of his first films he did gets noticed, and he gets another offer. And then over the years, that offer turned into another thing. And then eventually, he was offered into Hollywood. And when he got there, he realized that, well, I expected this to be very technologically advanced, and yet it is a complete mess. People are still not even using computers. And because he was one of the early adopters of computers, he slowly started performing very well. And he started doing some films. Rain Man was one of his first success films. And then slowly that moved on and on and on, eventually to the Dark Knight trilogy and where he is now with these ridiculously amazing film scores. You see, these, a lot of people think that things happen overnight, but that is not always the case. And so for him, I think it's a great illustration of how he really just pursued his path in life and did something he enjoyed and honed his craft and worked hard on it. And it eventually led to something fantastic. So it's a very fascinating illustration, and I think it's also very fascinating because one of his pearls of advice he gives in this book is that you want to pursue something that you are actually interested in and you really like, not because other people have forced it upon you. And then he remarks about how if he needs advice on law or medicine, all he has to do is ask his orchestra, because apparently, again, this may be tongue-in-cheek, but half his orchestra are